Hello, my name is Joseph Erstinghouse, and this is going to be my EGS3 presentation. I need to make an initial disclaimer, and that is that this video and its information is for entertainment and educational purposes. Um, Still, my information is important to me, and I take its heuristic development seriously. Okay, so as I said, my name is Joseph Erstinghouse. I was a cardiopulmonary laboratory technician, um, a 4H071 in the United States Air Force, um, years 2006 to 2012. I deployed to Iraq in 2009. We were forward deployed to Afghanistan. 37 missions later, come home, and life uh, life is never the same. So I'm going to get into a little why I'm doing this presentation here, and it's because in light of recent developments, and this turns out to be a wealth of whistleblower knowledge, former legislation, language, and key terms that were found in HR or House Resolution 2977. That was back in 2001. It did not pass. It should be noted it did not pass, but that was serious assembled language, and it was an attempt to do what was right, and that attempt failed. So the country and the world intelligence organization service, whatever you want to call it, persists with their crimes against the average citizen every day, completely unpunished. What we are seeing today, especially yesterday for the No Kings protest, was a subconscious fight against that, in my opinion. So um, let's get into a little bit about what happened to me. Um, so in retrospect, I believe Project Preserve Destiny was part of a sort of self-service back channel for the World Intelligence Services to learn about particular individuals that had been, for lack of better words and terms and succinct uh, way of putting this, but manipulated and placed into the population. This is something that the government has known about. It's a well-kept secret, and it's literally too outlandish for anybody to know to really take seriously. So it's well part of their disinformation sphere. They've infected the psyop is run real well because that faint signal out in the air, people really latched onto it. And that's where you get your nuts, your star seeds, your stigmata folks. That it's because they needed this atmosphere poison. So getting back to what happened to me in the service. Okay, so I found myself a victim of a particular honeypotting operation. Um, and I do see that it continues there. You know, for the most part, I don't see very many females being sent to suicide, but they exist. I know about them. Some one or two very close personal friends of mine. I also know that men have also been driven to suicide by this management of anomaly management is what we'll call it. We'll call it anomaly management. And um, I got the feeling about all this stuff, but I knew so very little, and it sounded so irrational, it's so crazy back then. But as time's gone on, and as I've digested more just of what my government has put out, and you could say it's part of a psyop or disinformation, but um, when you have an established body of experience from a long time of dreaming and seeing very strange things that you've just discounted your whole life, it starts to assemble into kind of a heuristic that it's very blurry, but one thing I notice is that resolution is changing as time goes by. So the honeypotting operation, I born a daughter, so instantly they have a way to control me, because I'm a man who I was very put to the wayside as a child, and it bothered me a lot. My parents' total lack of involvement. I had a very lonely childhood, very quiet, very strange. your typical ADHD that they throw on amphetamines. So I was on amphetamines for, upwards of like 6 years, I think, from 8 to 13. Um, so yeah, they traumatized me for an early age, made it so that when I would encounter a horrific narcissist, they could just take right over my life, like I was some kind of remote module to be commanded by Wi-Fi signals or something. And um, I was conditioned by a reactive abuse relationship where I'd be constantly abused emotionally, physically, and as my reactions to that abuse spiraled to the level that was engineered by this apparatus, um, I came above the military's radar, and that therein began true problems. Um, I began to have sleep paralysis, where I feel like I woke up where I was sleeping, and shadow figures would attack me and grab me and start shaking me. And when they grabbed me, I feel like the life was being drained out of me, like consciousness was fading, and fear, tons of fear. Um, so needless to say, that was way too much for me to deal with at the time. Um, and then let's be clear. I mean, like I think they used advanced technology to set up a stage for their tradecraft to use on me. So, like particularly for me, I was a hardcore atheist. I made YouTube videos criticizing religion and whatnot. So, what would I do if I was, an intelligence designed intelligence apparatus or personnel designed to be opposition forces for guys like me? I would mess with a particular, I'd use things like that to create maybe a religious experience and really mess with this person's mind, right? So I encountered stigmata, and I'll put pictures of it. I didn't delete them. I still have them. I cannot reach my own back. No, and I didn't sit still for anybody to do that to me. So that was a jarring experience. But I don't think they expected me to be as resolute through that, to assign it as a data point rather than oh my god, demons are real. I can't believe this happened to me. You know what I mean? Like I was like, okay, well that's anomalous. Never had that happen before. I've never had scratches appear on my back out of nowhere and then be able to touch them with hydrogen peroxide and they bubble because they're so fresh. Just never happened. But like crop circles with the technology that I'm about to outline for you in this presentation are not very hard to do. Yeah, sure, you got folks that are using the nylon cords attached to wooden boards. Yeah, sure, that's a known thing. They gotta drown out the real traffic, you know. So the way it's actually done is microwaves, surgically precise microwaves, and especially we're going to get into a little. I've written and assembled some pretty good cases on how they can affect somebody's consciousness and make them sit still in order to do something like that. But so microwaves, surgical little microwaves, denature some proteins on my back, make uh, make it look like there's a tiny, shallow cut where it's really just some skin cells that are mildly damaged, and voila, you've got plasma leaking out, so that when you touch it with hydrogen peroxide, boom, you got your catalyst reaction, the little bubbles, and it's no longer very jarring to me because it's pathetic, really. Like, really, you have technology like that can kill tumors, and you're fucking with your personnel, your normal folks, particularly a specialist who I wasn't a 7 level at the time. I ended up getting my 7 level after that. But yeah, sure. It just goes to show you how these campaigns don't work like they do on children out in the civilian world. Like, for example, when you have an anomalous, like somebody snap, I remember I saw a video of a woman, a little girl that had stabbed her brother. And then she's saying like, "Oh my God, Mom, I don't even understand what I did. This was some demonic shit." And I'm like, how weird of our defense apparatus to go and do this. Is it just practice? Like, are these people marked? I don't know, man. I'm not going to pretend to know. That's the whole point of all this. Is that there's a lot of open questions, and all I have is my life's example of to look on and begin reverse engineering and sort of it's just an intelligence operation where we are trying to figure out how does this thing work? How do they get in people's lives? And I feel like my presentation's about to do a lot of damage for how exactly that takes place. I think that the raw contact blew the whistle on this a long time ago in 1981. It said that your United States military societal division is creating these things. They're not manned. They are weapons, and they are used for psychotronic purposes and manipulation of the weather. So they've been really not causing bad weather. They have been using the limitations of their machines to muzzle the weather. That means that everything that's happened out there directly connected to our sun, and they know it. So we literally live with a demonic government that violates the creative principles and creative incoming, you know, the creative incoming will being woven like a permanent spider silk of the entire harmonic solar system harmonics. And yeah, our government is softening the blow, so to speak, but they fail. Alaska, Asheville, uh, San Antonio, they're failing. The system is failing, and eventually it's all going to come rushing through. They're going to run down to their dumbs, but we know those dumbs aren't going to hold. We personally guarantee those dumbs will not hold. They will not hold. They will be targeted resonantly and collapsed because we know how they were made. We know which isotopes were used to make them. Okay? I apologize. A little bit of anger comes up every once in a while. But moving right along, honeypotting operations, stigmata, sleep paralysis, these are all things that it can induce in people. And I have been gathering intelligence from former military spouses that a lot of their husbands had sleep disturbances, very strange things happening. So we're gathering the data and we're making a case. This ain't some conspiracy theory. This ain't some schizoaffective loser. No, I'm sorry. I do a lot of data correlation. I'm a data analyst. You can say that this guy's crazy. He's making mountains out of molehills. Well, I'm sorry, but I'm going to assemble so many molehills, but by the time I'm done, they will be a mountain, and the only choice will be the suspension of that tiny linkage of disbelief, and plausibility. The AIs beat the crap out of me with this presentation. They said, "Oh, you've got so many things to worry about: Green's reciprocity, the complete and total violation of thermodynamics." But thermodynamics ain't shit. You want to know why? Two words: time crystal. Violation of thermodynamics. Objects that have been completely shown to be real quantum oscillators that are reliable in their properties. So really, what I'm getting into is not too far beyond the pale, and so I'm trying to make sure I don't get lost here. Needless to say that the moment I spoke up about that tradecraft, the systems administrative wheels, it was like it changed the sign from positive to negative. The entire equation and how I was treated changed. I had counselors coming after me. I had my commander. I had OICs. I had NCOICs, people that really wanted me to suffer. And they made a few mistakes. They had a few good people in the chain of command. Guess what? I lost all of them, either to suicide or to deployments that happened all of a sudden out of their cycle. And that was a very interesting thing to watch happen, to watch how much the Air Force could move around just to decrease the pressure on one person, starve them of oxygen. Needless to say, ran out of allies real quick once people caught wind that I defended myself against my ex-wife, who had beat the ever-loving shit out of me. Let's be clear. I mean, I had the shit beaten out of me. She's real good at making sure that it was below the bruise line. She could use things like vacuum cords, and there are police reports that I intend to get and tend to put on blast. But until then, you know, needless to say, I fell down a really horrific rabbit hole, and it hurt a lot. Almost didn't make it. Thank goodness I made it. I have found a stable configurations, barely, um, to proceed with my work and to proceed thinking and processing everything that happened to me in the service, and hoping that with the whistleblower testimonies and these revelations coming out, that I'm going to understand eventually the time weapons that were used against me in my life. especially when I would not comply and establish enough blackmail material on myself. I was too clean. I wouldn't drift off where they wanted me to. And trust me, they took me places where it was very easy to have drifted off. They could have very easily assembled all kinds of very embarrassing, like to normal people, embarrassing. But to me, I'd have been like, okay, so you're gonna put it, you're gonna like use me living my life within the bounds of all normal laws and respecting the freedom and free will of other human beings against me. Good luck, because guess what? I've got more ammunition on you than you do on me. So I think that's going to be the end of this take, and we're going to begin getting into the EGS3 presentation and the disclaimer from now on. All right, all right, all right. Put this away and get on over. This is going to show a quick picture of my stigmata that I had mentioned, just in case anybody thought I was going to try and run away without any proof. And now we're going to go ahead and go into our presentation here. So this is my EGS3 presentation. Electro-Gravitic Systems, an overview of 3 supposedly common advanced avionics integrated field modulation propulsion systems. My name is Joseph Ersinghaus. I'm an associate of applied science, and this is my company, which I hope to make soon. Okay, this disclaimer is what we're going to do first. The information contained in this presentation explores advanced, speculative, and theoretical topics that may be considered controversial or unconventional, including concepts that could be interpreted as being received from non-human intelligences or psychological operations. While I, the author, have an intuitive belief in the information presented, I acknowledge that these are my personal views. This presentation is intended for the purpose of discussion and exploration of these ideas. I urge you to engage with this material critically and to use your own discernment to form your own conclusions. Any classified information contained herein is purely coincidental and not obtained from my ex-wife. Do with that what you will. Okay, so something to remember about this entire presentation. I am not declaring like exclusive criteria for vacuum polarization. Vacuum polarization is a spectrum. I love cats, but the metaphor, there are many ways to skin a cat, holds in this, because there are probably ways to achieve this beyond the 3 I'm going to mention. And there may even be many ways within each of these 3 types of constructions or propulsion packages to do this. So the basics are that field modulation propulsion systems function where the craft is not pushing against reaction mass, but altering the local space-time metric via controlled energy-matter interactions. These interactions are then modulated for vibratory resonances against the local dielectric, which is the magnetic field, or they use the ambient medium to generate similar but slightly different energetic configurations to sustain flight and inertially reduced modes of acceleration. So going right into something that needs to be covered about these systems and their nature, because it's not during the course of the main observables, people don't see control surfaces or windows very often, or cockpit type structures. So one would ask, how does it know where it's going? So in such systems, propulsion, navigation, and computation are interlinked. The same field control grid is often used for both movement and information processing. So our 3 common propulsion packages are your mercury phase vacuum polarization oscillators, your element 115 gravitic stacks, and you have your torsion supercavitation ram sleds. Okay, so production, initiation, and feedstock. Where do you get the stuff to make it? Okay, so first you have a matter phase isolation, and here, ideally, a subterranean mobile construction facility would grant you access to mantle slag. And such a facility equipped with mantle draw pipes would elevate the raw melt to zone centrifuges, powerful magnetic and electric, you know, probably vortex generators, kind of, you know, a more inclusive centrifuge type than what we're used to. Um, Lorentz skimming would strip heavy nuclei into a sideband for isotopic tailoring. Okay, your feedstocks, on-site fused mantle slag would be refined to high superconducting copper zirconate, high temperature superconducting copper zirconate. Now, most people would say, oh, I'm going to stop you right there. Copper zirconate is not superconductive at high temperatures. And one thing we're going to get into is the allowances that come from constructing a craft in the way that we're going to describe. So we are used to particular material constraints based off of temperature, pressure, yada, yada, yada. But what we don't, what is currently far beyond our engineering capabilities are the assembly of ions in such a manner that things like high pressure and effects that come from like their placement and stasis and far from equilibrium positions could yield material properties that we don't um, imagine possible. You know, it could be said that um, copper zirconate could be laid into one of these lattices in such immense pressure, you know, endogenous to the rest of the structures, you know, its coherence, I guess you could call it, and you know, this material might be placed in a molecular configuration where it's actually under many billions of pascals of pressure. So all of a sudden, it's you know, it is superconducting at room temperature. Okay. So another, moving on to asteroid grade nickel iridium pellets. This is obviously like, you know, um, materials that are not found on Earth, not in high enough concentrations to be useful. Eventually, I mean, theoretically, you could probably do it. Just, you know, you're mining from the entire planet to assemble mere single-digit numbers of craft. Not necessarily for nickel. We've got a lot of nickel, but iridium's a big problem. We don't have much of that. Okay, now moving on. Spectrally select glassified regolith and organoceramic lattices. So those are the three main groups in which you get supposedly uh, preparatory feedstocks for the construction of these craft. Okay, so we're going to go on to core principles of operation for the element 115 production properties and applications. So this forge would invoke a muon catalyzed fusion pocket converting bismuth 209 and calcium 48 pellets into metastable Moscovian isotope with 184 neutrons and supposedly a very long half-life, almost you know, a million years or something like that. It's ridiculous, but I highly doubt they last that long, especially based on the 4chan whistleblower information on how they have to deal with, um, you know, the complex isotopic handling for this type of craft. But supposedly, in the right isotopic state, this it produces a highly stable, heavy fermion lattice capable of interacting with with amplified 0-point field harmonics. When stimulated, it can emit gravity-like fields and controllable directional vectors. And that kind of backs up a little bit about what Bob Lazar said, that it's kind of like a virtual antimatter annihilation, and the waves resulting from that are gravitational um, in nature. So this gets on by phase inverting mass, stimulates a fractional negative inertial band, dramatically more efficient but dependent on the exotic isotope's nuclear potential wells. Okay, moving on to the mercury, or the mercury oscillator package, the core principles of operation. So their Mercury oscillator packages are essentially toroidal waveguides, where mercury vapor is spun to relativistic tangential speed. When synchronized and alternating charge plates, when synchronized with alternating charge plates, it seeds a micro vacuum polarization bubble that drags the craft in the direction uh, that the uh, matter-energy interactions are phased towards. Okay, it relies on rotational plasma of mercury, or mercury doped with copper isotopes, and toroidal containment. It creates a dynamic magnetic gravitational coupling when spun at relativistic edge velocities under high charge. Okay, now getting on to the 115 onboard computing. So integration with avionics, computation is not a separate subsystem in a craft like this. The drive grid itself runs control algorithms as part of its resonance modulation routines. It utilizes quantum interference cores where logic states are represented by standing gravitational potentials rather than voltage differentials. The processing speed is orders of magnitude above human optical semiconductor systems, and it's coherent. It can run coherent calculations at femto to attosecond switching rates. It's very impressive. It's like 10 to the negative 7 or 13. I'm not quite sure. Functionality, navigation solutions are computed in curved space-time coordinates, factoring both local and destination metric distortions in real time. And we're going to get into two different theoretical modes of travel. One involving linear um, linear velocities applied to uncurved space-time, and a limit of that sort of like full drive travel, I guess we could call it. And then phased velocity, where the space-time metric engineering crosses over into the temporal aspects, where to violate the speed of light, um, you're not traveling faster than it, you're tearing across space and curving space in such a way that um, you didn't linearly travel faster than light. You bent space to arrive somewhere faster than light could have done so. And that's a complicated, and I'm probably butchering it, but that's the best I've got for you. Now we've got copper mercury onboard computing. So this one, this is more of a surfing the field lines type thing. It's not brute forcing space-time metric. We can do some space-time metric engineering from this, but it's not necessarily how we, use this craft to get around. This one is primarily EM field modulated. Okay, so computation occurs in plasma confinement harmonics, similar to analog optical computing, but with charged fluid dynamics as the carrier. So processing speed is allegedly slightly slower than the Element 115 systems in pure logical throughput, but it excels in sensor fusion, integrating environmental, electromagnetic, gravitational, and plasma diagnostic data in near real time. So functionality, it's more adaptive to variable environments, better at surfing natural gravitational gradients than brute forcing metric changes. Now, based on this information, one may come to the conclusion, we'll see a little later on, that these craft might crash a little less often on Earth. And that might be because while supposedly Element 115 systems are inherently shielded, perhaps there's some sort of, maybe there's a level of solar interference or jarring nature that can overwhelm a 115 system, whereas I don't know, I just get the feeling that these crash less often, even though they are, in EVE Online terms, we would say less shiny. Anyway, moving right along. Here we have a capability comparison between the 115 and Mercury oscillator craft. We have computational throughput. I don't have numbers like in teraflops or whatever unit of measure. I would hope that they are at the exaflop level or higher. But that is just the ultra high versus a high comparison. And then, of course, you have the comparison between gravimetric logic core and the plasma analog computation. All right, and metric control would, like I said, the differences between fine surgical space-time distortion, which may very well be able to travel in between galaxies, whereas the oscillator needs a field a natural field, a celestial field scaffold to get around. I don't think it could just point into the middle of this intergalactic medium and do very well. It'd probably be like taking the wrong small type of ship into the ocean, like a kayak. Anyway, so flexible gradient adaptive control, supposedly. All right, now navigation, we have predictive and anticipatory for our 115 craft, whereas the oscillator is reactive and responsive. Remember, we're talking about space-time engineering versus field navigation. So the pilot interface, apparently both have neuroresonant modes of travel. The Element 115 craft apparently does not have a manual hybrid option because of its, it's hard to explain, but you cannot speak or type the type of coordinates or even mediate them probably very well between an AI. I would say that neuroresonance is probably AI interfacing with a brain or a properly advanced consciousness that understands the coordinates of space-time and its curvature or whatever. Starting point versus destination curvature and considerations and all that. I tried probing a little bit by myself, but I'm not very good at it. So moving right along. Stealth, apparently a 115 craft has excellent, especially in low sublight signature operations. I'd imagine that they can vibrate and be literally right outside of perception, assuming there's no high amount of, electromagnetic interference, particularly like, I don't know, coronal mass ejections or, really high KP indexes for the planet. Supposedly, moving right along again to our Mercury oscillator, moderate stealth capabilities. Plasma turbulence is detectable. I would imagine that is a radar pickup type potential, a radar potential. So, and then we got maintenance, complex isotopic handling for our 115 craft that is backed up by our whistleblower on 4chan. And then less exotic materials, but more moving parts for our Mercury oscillator. Now we're going to get to our third type of craft. This was done separately because I wanted a little bit more. I wanted to really make them hurt on this one, because apparently this is a very large knowledge gap in what our supposed shadow government knows how to do. So I really wanted to beat this one to death with as much and specific information as I could. So what we have here are our torsion supercavitation ram sled craft. Okay, these generally speaking are the Tic Tacs and the less circular shaped but more oblong type craft here. So you get spectral select glassified regolith, which is lunar or asteroid regolith, is glassified into high transparency, frequency selective ceramic composites. These act as waveguides and field containment shells resistant to plasma ablation. An organoceramic lattice and organic polymer ceramic hybrids create torsionally resilient scaffolds. They're flexible yet strong at the molecular scale. The drive produces a rotating torsional pressure field ahead of the craft, creating a void tunnel or supercavity through fluid or plasma mediums. The sled then rides this void at reduced drag, analogous to underwater supercavitating torpedoes, but extended into the atmosphere, plasma, or even partial vacuum with an ionized medium. I'm pretty sure that means everything happening within the magnetopause, particularly because of the resistance to plasma ablation. I wouldn't be surprised if they could get pretty close to the sun, at least Parker probe closeness, especially with a reflective glassified regolith. So the ram sled intake the craft uses forward inlets to ingest formerly specified medium into torsion chambers, where it is spun, compressed, and re-ejected, reinforcing the cavity wall. So from the intake to the ejection conditions are calculated and used to reinforce the craft itself. Now we have further architecture with field-tuned cavitation and dense mediums. So the torsion cavity generator itself is a multi-axis toroidal. They're multi-axis toroidal coils embedded in a organoceramic lattice that's more toward the outside of the craft, I guess. Or no, I'm sorry. The organoceramic lattice is kind of like the core of the craft. If you imagine, this is where the glassified regolith probably changes to this material to serve as a crew compartment. Okay, so it's driven by high frequency toroidal oscillations, multi-megahertz to the gigahertz band, depending on the medium density. Produces rotating pressure field differentials ahead of the craft. So the spectral select hull layer, as I mentioned before, transparent to drive frequencies. It's opaque to destructive plasma harmonics. Acts as a phase window and lets torsion fields through while blocking external turbulence. Regolith-derived ceramics provide local abundance and radiation resistance. This is true. Now we're getting into the further architecture. Organoceramic skeleton provides torsional elasticity to survive violent gradients. So this designates the outside plasma ablation resistant layer as kind of like our, it's our shocks, it's our driver, and then the skeleton is the isolation. This is where I guess we transfer into the inertially mass-reduced pocket. Self-healing microvoids, so the polymer reweaves into ceramic fractures in that interface. The ram sled intake and exhaust. Intake, forward scoop channels, environmental medium, and processing. So that's that medium's taken in, it's ionized, it's torsion spun and recombined. The exhaust is re-expelled as high-energy vortices, reinforcing the cavity walls and optionally providing thrust. So, you've got the ability to stay still or probably synchronize speed with the relative bodies that you are by. Okay, now we're going to get into a little bit how these are built. I have written a medium entry on this that goes into far more detail. I'll link that in the description. But we'll go over a small kind of chunk pre-elaboration. So a harmonic holograph, you think of a standing sound light wave. It arranges ions to the craft's lattice before they cool. So no conventional molds. Avionics and propulsion are functions of specialized topological arrangements specific to each of the propulsion package variants. Avionics and propulsion embedding. So you have an avionic entanglement burn-in, where the shell is bombarded by two counter-rotating imaginary plane waveforms. This writes a default reality vector so the hull can yaw across probability gradients without hull shear. Now I wanted to stop right here on this statement because it kind of carries some there are consequences to this logic, and to yaw across probability gradients, in my opinion, means I think that lends a little bit to the many worlds, where we have an entire infinite multiverse of gradients that stem from every single individual and maybe even every single atom, and precipitated by every single possible degree of freedom every one of those systems can experience. It's infinite. So to yaw across those gradients would be to visit different outcomes. Sister gradients is one of the ways I've called it, where it is said that Google's Majorana chip did what it did because it was communicating with other gradients. And so essentially you have kind of like a qubit multiplicity across universes, and then if that entanglement takes place, your computation, it becomes instantaneous. I mean, we're talking trillions of realities having entire Lagrangians computed in moments of time that are too small for us to even bother with. Anyway, so moving on to propulsion embedding, the Mercury oscillator. We've already been over this stuff. I'm gonna go ahead and skip this. It's dumb to repeat ourselves, but essentially, um, it's two different ways to skin a cat. Okay, now the propulsion embedding continued for our supercavitation ram sleds and the self-healing seal. So ram sled housings induct cold plasma from the ambient medium and route it through Mobius twisted field coils for nearly dragless traversal, and a final nanoscopic mist of chalcogenide glass seals microfractures. This layer can reanneal under moderate thermal stress. So by going fast and heating up its plasma, it can actually, fix itself. Imagine having a car with a tire that, if you got a flat, you could just drive it more to fix it. That's awesome. This is what they're hiding from us, or this is what they're hiding from us because they can't get to it, because they can't build these. Okay, so here's some capability and throughput cadences I was given. So for our Mercury phase vacuum polarization oscillators, we have a less than or equal to limit of 0.12 C. That's 12% the speed of light intra-atmosphere. I think it's making that distinction because perhaps they can go faster outside the atmosphere. Okay, it would make sense. Then you have your 115 gravitic stack, and it declares from 12% to 0.75% the speed of light. No. Yeah, 75%. So 12% to 75% of the speed of light. Interplanetary. Now, I wanted to get into again that, as I spoke before about space-time metric engineering. I'm thinking that these limits are linear velocity. I do not know if any of these craft can do the phased velocity where they travel way faster than light by going to points in space that are farther than light can reach in those allotted amount of times, or if there are like dimensional um, sort of a dimensional weather system, like a complicated brain topology in the universe that we don't understand yet, and it's kind of like waiting for storms or clear. You know what I mean? I wonder if it's just another, like a larger galactic or intergalactic ocean that we don't understand, or maybe even intercosmic ocean. So then you have your torsion supercavitation ram sleds, which are mainly for stealth or sublight travel. And so these are your ocean darts, short, I guess your planetary vehicles. And each of these, apparently, you can make one hull for the Mercury oscillator in 11 days if you have a holographic matter printer. And then the 115 stack seems to be the most complicated and difficult to build, 52 Earth days for a single hull. And the torsion cavitation ram sleds seem to be like our cheapy, not necessarily cheapy because they perform well and do the job. It's certainly better than flying American Airlines or Spirit. No, nothing against Southwest, but I'd take this over a Gulfstream. Um, so three hulls in 7 days, and that we don't have these, I don't think. So that would be the prize, other than the shiny gravitic stack. We have some capabilities and throughput cadence. These are more numeric. Keep in mind, these could be wrong. You know what I mean? These could be completely wrong, but these were figures that kind of seem like they make a little bit of sense. You have your field intensity at 1 megawatt for each. I don't think that means that that's the limit of any of these crafts' field intensities. I think they can go way farther than that. I think they could, they can draw energy that would make nuclear weapons look like Tinker Toys. So, and then you have a metric for, like we're talking about a compliance ratio, right? Like maybe a gravitational or a work compliance, where this is the amount of energy that the ship would need to use to inertially reduce mass and begin to escape Earth's velocity. Earth's gravitational field. I'd imagine that these numbers are at maximum um, cost. So essentially, to go straight up. Obviously, the 115 has the lowest cost, whereas the Mercury oscillator has the highest. And your ram sled at a pretty good bargain as compared to your oscillator craft, but not quite as good a deal per energy spent as your 115. Getting into your stability versus geomagnetic storms, like I said, they say the 115 stack is inherently shielded, but we have them crashed or we have them come down. So there has to be some sort of problem specific to our planet, especially around the Bermuda area, as to why these things keep coming down. A lot of them have crashed, and it's kind of one of the points of ridicule for people. Oh, they're millions of years in advance of us, but then they come here and crash. And it's like, well, they've been here for fucking hundreds of thousands of years. Like, I'm not sure there exists a perfect, like, can it be possible to have an operationally perfect record? I don't think so. I think accidents happen, no matter who you are, no matter how many brain cells you have, or how many millions of years in advance you are. I think, like, that's just the nature of the universe. It's unpredictable, even with throughput systems like these. Anyway, moving right along. You've got our Mercury oscillator craft requires compensation, but has low sensitivity, supposedly. And we get into a little bit of a dilemma here with the supercavitation ram sled. So it says passive contra-rotor bias, and then track reference, minor trim on egress. So I'm guessing that means that the geomagnetic storm disturbance has to be tracked, and the flight mode needs to be compensated for in some sort of orientation. And then the passive contra rotor bias, I'm guessing that is the plasma ablation happening around the craft as a consequence of its fast travel 1 and its ejection of those vortices. So material sourcing, obviously for the 115, it's going to be niche and high risk because we don't know what we're doing with an isotope like that. Whereas an oscillator, supposedly we can make these. Supposedly in 1981, we had somewhere in the neighborhood of 6,000 of them, like 550 or so. So by now, I'm not sure if they're manned. I'm not sure if we have, many, many thousands, but these are the guys, in my opinion, that are up trying to mess with people's minds and control the weather, trying to make the weather less bad for people they like. Okay, now back to the ram sled. Apparently, they are also industrial common. Copper, aluminum alloys, ferrites, and carbon composites. So wouldn't it be awesome if we knew how to assemble these in the way that they performed as they do that we have seen? Okay, so key points and takeaways. As I said before, remember, vacuum polarization is a spectrum. Supposedly, 115 offers a low threshold gateway. Copper mercury exploits the same physics, but its oscillators must brute force a higher magnitude to punch the local dielectric constant. That means bulkier capacitors, tighter cooling loops, and shorter duty cycles. Yet for suborbital rescue, cargo hops, or covert atmospheric transects, the mercury oscillator hulls suffice and can be replicated with metals already on our periodic table. That concludes the presentation. This is my best attempt to get these supposedly thermodynamically violating processes out into the mainstream with a little more detail and with a little more technical grip that can be piled upon by people far smarter and capable than I am. So I hope you enjoyed it. I hope as time comes out, or I mean, as time goes by, the further developments will either detract from or add to this as a small base of knowledge. And all I have to say is thank you for your time. Thank you for listening thus far.